I got dark for a while. I would have never said I don't believe in God. I would have never said, oh, I don't this or that. But I was laying in a bathtub every night hoping to die, right? Like sitting in the pitch black, just being like, something needs to change.
What are you saying?
What are you saying? It's my branch of Christianity.
Welcome to the Rich Dawn, where eternal beatitude begins in this life. I'm Kyle Dean, and today I have with me Matt Haberstro, a MBA entrepreneur, a Sonny from POD, a former punk aficionado, and a pastor's kid in the Christian tradition. Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Kyle. How are you, man?
I'm doing incredibly well.
Awesome.
I'm so glad to have you on here.
It has been way too long since we've hung out.
No doubt. I know. Did we ever do this Super Smash?
I don't think we did.
We have things to do,
We have a plethora of things. We're supposed to jam. We're supposed to play Mario Kart.
Ministry around
Smash
the world.
Bros. Around the world. And here we are.
But we're doing the podcast first for everybody. So, yes, praise the Lord. And, I want to say, man, like, we can get into, like, maybe faith-based stuff, later on. But for the sake of our professional business, mutual contacts in the entrepreneurial space, we'll lead with that. And I'm super excited to get into that with you because, as I mentioned, you have your MBA and you're entrepreneurial minded, as is I. So, like, I think that there's a whole lot that can be poured over there to bring value to our viewers and listeners. And I just love to pick your brain and learn from the wisdom that you've gleaned.
Absolutely.
So feel free to riff however you want to start.
Awesome. Well, let's give a little context. I have had an MBA for about a year. I had my own startup. I closed that about a year ago in August. So that's coming up. Not quite a year yet. But I have had the luckiest experience in the world to work with amazing people and get to go and network and talk with as many people who are just incredible people.
Yes. In Western New York?
In Western New York, in Bosnia, in Serbia, Romania, all around the world. So, like, it's been an amazing experience.
Wow. As a part of your initial startup?
Yeah.
Please, tell me more.
So, at the University of Buffalo, about 3.5 years ago, I got invited to kind of just look at someone's slide deck, actually, at the end of a class. Yep. So got my MBA, got my undergrad there. I also have a degree from NCCC. Nice. So 3 degrees in business administration. Maybe it's a little redundant, but hey, I stuck with it. Yes. But yeah, I had a professor who was really meaningful to me. His name's Bob Newbert. He's an incredible entrepreneur. He thinks about innovation, and there's a couple other things that I'll get into a little bit later that he really inspired me to do. And one day at the end of class, he was like, hey, I know that you can make a decent slide deck. Can you help someone make a pitch deck? And I was like, okay, I don't really know what that means, but I said yes.
Yeah.
And,
2 feet in.
There's a local entrepreneur here in the area. His name is Jack McGowan. He's incredible. And Jack's kind of summarized what happened there is Jack said to me, I don't know, about a year ago, Matt, in anything that you would do to prove anything, just show up. And that's really stuck with me, that just show up. And I didn't even realize that was part of what I was doing already. And, I said yes to an opportunity that I had no clue what was going to happen. And that turned into a 3-year relationship building, relationship and mentoring and learning a lot for myself from Bosnian, Serbian entrepreneurs in a program called the Bold Fellowship. They're really cool. The Bold
Fellowship.
Yes. And their purpose is to begin to stop the brain drain from the Balkan region. So a lot of people get educated and they're incredible. They're very resourceful, and the pay scale is higher in other countries. So they leave. Which has caused massive economic problems in smaller countries. Awesome people who've looked at life and said, I want to actually fix the problem. I don't want to be part of the problem. Right. And I want to build my company here. I want to, make an effect in my own region. And, they're doing it. And
how did they bring the meeting of the minds together to execute that? I mean, was it like incentivization from local government? Was it
a little bit of that? U.S. State Department's involved, local governments depending on the region in the country. And actually, there's a guy, his name is Philip Sasic, and he is Croatian, if I'm not wrong.
Sure.
And he moved away when he was young. He lives in New York City and realized, I want to make an effect. I want to help people. And he has dedicated all of his energy and all of his resources into building something that he can make a change. And his small vision really has made a huge impact. And I know in the 3 years that I've been there, I've worked with over 60 startups. Very, very proud of the people and the individuals that I've worked with. Everything from recycling glass companies to finance apps to there was one this year that we worked with that does queuing. So they help governments and people who have traditionally long waiting times organize their queues so that when you as a customer go in, you know exactly your appointment's at 10:30. It notifies you, hey, the line's backed up a little bit. Like really innovative things. And it's stuff that I never would have seen myself being involved with. And I get to sit there and listen to entrepreneurs share their ideas. And I'm like, holy cow, this is so cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm really inspired whenever I talk with you, man, because, you know, I think the extent of my personal awareness is really from the American front in the sense that, you know, like we know this country was, you know, founded to support entrepreneurs. Like entrepreneurialism is huge here. Of course, you've got capitalism is a big component of our market here and everything like that. But I know so much less about the entrepreneurial hustle like worldwide.
Yeah.
And I've always been so inspired because whether it's in the business front or of course in the faith front, as we'll get into later, like you have connections throughout the world. Like you've been exposed to many cultures. And I think that really brings a well-roundedness in terms of someone's perspective that they can bring to the table. So
I appreciate that compliment, man.
Yeah, 100%, man. Well, and it's earned. I mean,
Yeah.
that's you know, you've experienced that. And I think, you know, sometimes people that don't ever get out of their hometown or whatever the case might be, don't have that same level of awareness of cultural, you know, sensitivity, you know, awareness, perspective, and also like becoming effective. Yeah. When it comes to like making change, whether it's in an entrepreneurial pursuit or wherever it is.
Yeah. Well, I think that really starts with just A, like I said before, showing up.
Yes.
And B, not assuming you're right about anything.
Right.
You know, there are fundamental truths in life that we all know. You know, gravity's a thing, right?
Yeah.
But
some would, you know, argue against it.
At the same time, like when you have the opportunity to learn from someone who thinks nothing like you, respecting the fact that there is a huge difference and being able to learn to recognize what are their strengths. I mean, that is something that is a huge missing component, I think, in a lot of modern culture, is people like to be very deep in one area, but then not recognize all of the strengths of the people around them and build a team, right?
Yes.
And I've been lucky to watch some of the most diverse teams develop in thought, in region, in race, gender. It doesn't really matter. But people who look at each other and say, okay, that's not my strength, but that's yours. Let's work together, right? And I think that's what really changes a region. You know, even you see the positive changes that's happened in Buffalo over the last 30 years. And I think a lot of that has to do with people parking their ego and saying, you know what, for the cause of helping this city grow and stabilize economically, I'm going to park my ego. I'm going to work really hard towards working with people and not just, I'm going to do it over here and you're going to do it over there. And I think that for the timing of Western New York and the greater region of the Northeast, how lucky are we to be alive at this point?
It's incredible. I think like the tech innovation and revolution alone has spilled over into literally every single field.
Yeah.
And like you said, even just like developing an app for queuing, like, you know, and I remember when I was at RIT, like early on in human computer interaction class, they hit us with the paradox of technology, which is that technology makes things simpler, yet it makes things more complex at the same time.
So much so.
And it's just it's nuts. It's like a koan in Buddhist parlance to just sit there and steep in that. But then you have to transcend it and be like, okay, so what are we going to do about that?
Yeah.
How do we try to stay ahead of, essentially being part of the solution, as you said?
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of a funny story that comes to mind is, my mom 15 years ago couldn't even use a CD player. Like, she just couldn't figure out, open up the CD, put it in there, click play. Like, it was just...
Your mom and my mom both. That's
right?
the only reason I'm laughing.
And now she's operating on her iPhone, and she has an iPad, and she's running like QuickBooks for the organization she works for. And like, she's doing all this stuff, and like...
Evolution?
I guess so. Like, but when she recognized to stop fighting the mentality of my way is more efficient and just adapting, like, such a cool process to see.
Yes.
Like, she's killing it, and I'm like, Mom, like, you're fixing things that other people don't know how to do now. Like, she's like, oh yeah, it's easy, click click click. Like,
but no, she does great. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you get some inherent qualities depending on the generation that it's always going to be there. I think there's something that kind of defines epochs in time, but at the same token, you gotta adapt, and you have to overcome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So, I mean, you had a startup, open, shut, very standard process in the entrepreneurial world.
Oh,
right?
extremely common.
All of the greats, the millionaires, the billionaires, all say, like, I heard a recent quote. It's like one of my favorites in terms of not giving up. Like, it's all about framing, right? The quote unquote failures is recognizing, like, the journey is a mountain, and I have to climb this mountain. And once you get to that mountain, once you define whatever success means for you, you look back at the mountain, you realize, oh yeah, the mountain that I just climbed is all of the heaping pile of all my failures, like, that got me
That's
there.
Good.
But success means not giving up and continuing. And again, I wouldn't even define it as a failure. I mean, I think that's a self-limiting language.
Right.
And but I wonder what that means for you, man. Like, what did you learn from, you got the degree under your belt, you got life experience in the field, you've met a bunch of people, and you've seen different visions and seen them come to fruition at times. Like, what do you think the next step is?
The next step is continuing to show up.
Yes.
Obviously. I don't know where my destiny lies. I don't know where my career trajectory is at that point. Everyone has hopes and aspirations and goals, but you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. At the same time, you do know that you can control what you can today, and becoming 1% better every day adds up over a lifetime. So for me,
that's like perspective.
Yeah. For me, I started a new job about 3 weeks ago. I'm pretty happy to be in the space that I'm in, and there's some challenges, but it's also something that I want to be better at. I want to get better at, and I want to understand the organization that I've joined. And so for now, it's learning that discipline, right? At the same time, I think there's a lot of questions that I answered when I had my startup of, every entrepreneur needs to have. And fundamentally, one of them is your why.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you can answer your why, holy cow, there's not a lot of challenges that you can't overcome, because if you have a solid why, when it gets hard, and not if, because it's going to,
100%,
you can fall back and go, okay, yeah, why am I doing this? And if your why changes, then you kind of recognize, okay, maybe I need to adapt, or maybe this is my walkaway point. And recognizing that earlier on, rather than, wasting 5 or 6 years, is really important.
Or decades.
Yeah. Some people's cases, absolutely. And there are truly great ideas in every corner that you can take. But recognizing what your skill sets are, recognizing what's your why, and what you can bring to a team, you can accomplish anything. Kind of as I mentioned before, there's a professor at the University of Buffalo. His name's Bob Newbert, and he has a curriculum based on what he calls an abundant life, right? And for Bob, an abundant life isn't a monetary thing exclusively. There's an aspect of that. But for him, an abundant life also includes good relationships, having the capabilities to do what you want when you want, kind of controlling your own destiny. Those are all things that in an abundant life you can pursue.
I'm hearing social equity, work-life balance, and freedom when you say that.
Yeah.
Those are very critical.
And that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people define success as just monetary or by tasks. But if you have a solid why and you go back and you go, okay, what did I truly want out of this experience? Or what did I want out of this business? Or what problem did I want to solve for my customers? You can fall back to those answers. You can actually do way more. And when you're doing those things, the money will follow, right? If it's truly a great innovation, or if it's truly a great service or a great product that you've made, the money will catch up if it's good. And, there's lots of complicated things like timing, and there's, personal character and making sure that you're reaching the right deadlines and all stuff. Those things you can fix those things, or you can work on those things. But it's interesting to see how the fundamental belief of saying, okay, I'm not going to be limited by X or Y because my focus is on what's my why, or living a life to your fullest in abundance and not being constantly worried about the scarcity of products and the scarcity of money and the scarcity of time.
Oh, yeah.
How much that changes your perspective.
Absolutely.
And am I a master at that? Absolutely not. But that concept alone just really challenged me to start to say yes to opportunities that I never would have said yes to in the past.
Praise the Lord. What if I may get a little personal with you, if you had to hammer down, knowing that this will change in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, potentially, what would you say is more at the root of your own personal why, or what success might mean to you?
I know that one of my biggest whys is I like to help people. Even though I'm a little bit more on the introverted side of the spectrum, I like people. I like helping people, and I like watching people succeed. And I know that in whatever industry that I may be in, that is a primary driver for me. So the pitfalls of that are things like, okay, don't get overwhelmed by people. Don't get disappointed or disillusioned by people, okay? Having a driver in 1 year or in 5 years or in 10 years, falling back to that, why am I doing this, is to help people. I want to see people be successful. I want to see people overcome challenges. And whether that is a friend who's, struggling with something on addiction, or some corporation that is a really awesome solution to a problem that a lot of people face.
Right.
What's that driver? So I can't fully answer that question, but I can say, like, okay, my why is let me help people.
100%. Yeah, same. Kindred spirits, 100%. Yeah. And that's one reason why we've gelled so well from go. I mean, and I think one thing I've had to learn over the years with that, similarly, because it sounds, what I'm hearing you say, and I'm not trying to project, is that you're higher on the empathy scale than the narcissism scale. Because all of us are somewhere on that scale.
Yeah.
And it's not a judgment statement. It's just an observational thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, the pros are that you really care about others and not just self, but then the cons can be like you have to set healthy boundaries. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yes, and it's good. Like even when you're saying like show up, it's great to show up. That being said, like for me, I've shown up at like business incubators and like entrepreneurial things, and you have to be careful about guarding your precious time, because sometimes you'll run into like everybody's on the same level or a similar level, and then it just becomes like a back padding or a lick wounding session instead of like a let's get to the next level.
Well, I think you fall back to recognizing that you need to have a community, right? You can't do anything solo. That's not how we were designed as a species, right?
Yes.
We were designed to be in community. And in the entrepreneurship community, you can't succeed without a serious network of support and people who are going to both pull you in the right direction, and the people who are also going to say, whoa. One of the mistakes we made in our in our startup is we had 4 members on our team, and each of us had our own group of mentors. So there was approximately 15 people speaking into our small company. And the beauty of that is we were very communally focused, right?
Yes.
The challenge of that is you can't succeed trying to follow 15 people's advice.
No, that's a good point. Yep.
Narrow them down, but go far with the ones who are truly in your corner and who aren't telling you what to do, but are helping you problem solve and giving you tools to succeed. And I think that's where that community aspect is really important, because if you don't have people who are in your corner but aren't trying to problem solve for you, they're trying to give you tools to succeed, it's a very different approach.
That's one thing I love about being the agile methodology.
Yeah.
Talking process in terms of like project management. And Scrum in particular, you'll get the Scrum masters, and literally the quintessential role that they play is being a servant leader, but without like defined authority.
Yep.
And you have to like help others to get things done and to stay on task and connect people. I absolutely love that. I mean, it speaks to the life coach in me, like just wanting to help people and helping them to kind of see where they need to go, but within their parameters. Just that, because if it's too much or too little, then it's not really helpful.
Exactly. With everything, there's a fine line of balance, right?
Yes.
You can work 24 hours a day, but ultimately you're going to burn out. Yes. If you're doing 24, probably in like 48 hours, you're going to burn out,
right?
If not sooner. But recognizing when to walk away because there's something that is being inefficient by continuing to try to plug away at it. I actually just had this conversation with a dear friend of mine where they're working just crazy hours, and like good for them. They're young, they're hustling. But I kind of said to them like, hey, why don't you walk away from what you're working on for just about half hour? Like, you don't need to be gone forever. Just like go take a walk and stop thinking about it, because you'd be shocked with your solution, right? But their deadlines are approaching fast, and so they got to get the task done. And you can get in your own way by not breathing.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's studies on that. I've been at a bunch of different company cultures, and some are like, take your break, it's the law, and not to mention that it's good for you, right? Yeah, I know, right? You see all the linked, I mean, that could be a whole podcast about employers that constantly try to find corners to cut, unfortunately. But the recharge is so important. Then you'll get other places where the company culture is something like, oh, look at me, I don't ever take breaks.
Yeah.
Like, I'm bringing more to the table. Yeah. And it's like, are you? I don't know.
I'm not really sure. Like, if you go and like have a meal, maybe you'll work a little bit harder for the next 15 minutes, so you'll get more done in 15.
Of the same amount of time that we're all putting in might go up.
Quality over quantity, always.
But also, I mean, one thing I'm hearing you say is just being cognizant of the fact that the people that you surround yourself by are going to be so impactful on your outlook on life, your success. Yeah. They always say, like, surround yourself with the 5 most successful people. Yeah. I try to find the people that are more successful than me and spend as much time with them as I can in gratitude, and because like you said too, you have to have egos checked at the door, because otherwise how do you get from that place where hustling, deadlines, you're under the gun, and it's like you're working extremely hard just to make a living, to transcend to, maybe the next step for some people is becoming like a solopreneur. Mm-hmm. And then it speaks to what you said, where like everything is on you. Yeah. But where's the collaboration? Yeah. And then and there's varying scales on that too, right? You see the people that have like 5, 6, 7 projects at the same time, and it's like, but are you successful at any of them yet? Right. Well, it's like zone in.
Definitely been there in the last year.
Oh, I've been there too. This is literally, I'm referring to past failures in my heaping pile. But like, and then you realize, like, no, zone in. Like, some of the most successful people, like, I mean, some people are like ADD to the point where it's their superpower. and then they can do the multiple.
Yeah.
But others, it's like hunker down, do the thing. But then you need to transcend that too. You have to develop a team that enabling people that are like, you're way better at that thing than I am, than these people are, identifying strengths and then empowering. And then from there, a lot of people don't even think like this. They'll go their entire career without thinking this, but make it so that you're no longer working for the money. Get the money to work for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're financial freedom.
Financial freedom. You're able to make those decisions.
Balance.
You want to go to Italy for the week on a beautiful vacation with your family. Like, amazing. Go do that.
Make it a business trip.
Right? Make it a business trip. Go find that thing.
Yeah.
Write it off on your taxes. Like, do what you need to do. It's not financial advice, but I mean, if you have a good accountant, he can give you financial advice.
Indeed.
But yeah, I think about all the books I've read about things like the 6 Geniuses of Work, or some of the personality profiling books, and you think about those things. And
you do DISC?
I've done DISC.
Yeah, I've done DISC. We can speak there.
I've done DISC. I've done Myers-Briggs. I've done Gallup's Strength Finders. I've done Enneagram. I've done all of those things, and within reason, balance is everything.
Yeah,
you can't make it your whole personality to be like, my personality is a bunch of personality tests.
Right.
But, if it speaks 1 or 2 lines into trying to help you problem solve and get you to the next level, awesome. My sister is actually just talking about one that I'm going to try to take probably in the next month or so, about executors versus visionaries.
Yes.
And there's like a scale of whether you're an executor or a visionary, and how there's a lot of conflict in work about people who are so vision focused that they can't execute, and then you have the people who are so execution focused that they
continue to work harder but not smarter.
Exactly. And I think of a case where there was a guy that my sister worked with, who, incredible guy, wonderful heart, just the type of guy you want on every team, but he was an executor, not a visionary. And so when you ask him about, we have this big event coming and we need to plan for your team to be doing this, he starts drawing a map. Well, the map has nothing to do with anything, but he's so focused on executing that he has to build the map in order to set the stages so that he can figure out. And it's as simple as just being like, okay, pick up the phone and tell your people, hey, we have this on our plan. Right. There's no map necessary.
It's funny because one could argue that that's a visionary thing to do.
Yeah.
So it just seems like the focus needs to be harnessed in the right direction.
Exactly. And knowing your limitations is huge.
It is.
I have definitely been in places where I've been underutilized, and I've also been in places where I've bitten off way more than I can chew. And then I've disappointed people in both spectrums, right? Like, when you're bored at work and you're not really doing anything, people notice. And they're like, hey, you're not even giving it an effort. It's like, yeah, because I'm bored. That's kind of a bad excuse.
Yes.
Right? And on the flip side, you're so overwhelmed that you're just almost in analysis paralysis, right? Like, you're just stuck. You're looking at all this stuff and you're like, oh, I can't do any of it because it's all overwhelming. I think that's where having those 5 people around you who are visionaries, I'll steal it from the music scene, is like, you never want to be the best musician on a bad band. You want to be the worst musician in a good band.
Yeah.
Because those guys are going to pull you somewhere. I was a house drummer at my church for 8 years, and there were a few teams where there was just a huge talent gap between me and them. And they pulled me in the direction to be a better drummer, to be thinking about, okay, how do I serve the music, not how do I serve my ego, or how do I really make this other person shine in this song by either easing into something or maybe rolling it up a little bit more because that's what he needs or she needs. And it's like, okay, being complimentary.
Yes.
And you learn all these weird little intangibles about people when you're working on a team. And, I think about being in a band, and there used to be this one girl who, before she would sing, she would like flick her pinky right before she would go into something. She had no clue she was doing that, but like the rest of the band learned to look at that because we knew we could like predict where she was going on that little intricacy, right? Like,
Yep.
okay, oh, she's going to get a little bit more powerful right now. Roll into this.
Yes.
And like those types of fascinating little quirks that you learn about your teammates, you just start gelling and, you know, you play something beautiful, whether that's in business or music.
Right. Yeah. And one thing that's just so important to remember too, going back to the why, is if you're aligned with your goals in life, hopefully you'll gravitate to those scenarios where your heart's going to be in it, and you're going to give more than the bare minimum. There's this like movement within the business world, the entrepreneurial world, to try to identify transcending the culture where your employees are essentially doing the bare minimum that they can not to get fired.
Yeah.
Because that's what a lot of people find themselves in. Like, it's a part of their calculation. It's like, okay, let me give the resume into the pile of resumes. Let me try to get this 9 to 5 that gives me benefits.
Yeah.
And, you know, work as hard as I need to not to get fired as a part of my work-life balance, right? Because I'm not overexerting myself.
Yeah.
And then, man, just do this until I retire, and that's the American dream.
Yeah.
Which it's, you know, I think there's a lot of self-limiting there, you know, but it's all framing. Yeah. Some people are like, man, if I can just find the 9 to 5 and the bennies are good, I'm already crushing it compared to a good percentage of the population right now. And for a lot of us, I mean, you know, you get a lot of, I think this is another self-limiting belief, like within the millennial or the Zoomer generation, it's like, well, we've got so much more on our plate than our grandparents ever even knew because of the analysis paralysis of all the tech and everything. And it's like, I mean, it's like tomato, it's like good and bad. It's like, look at all the opportunity.
We know too much.
It's brutal. It's like you have to, we talked about a little bit about that offline. It's like, it's just, you have to focus in at some point and then, you know, crush whatever it is. So it's like, maybe don't go into something coasting. Go into something, like you just said, you start a brand new job. Yeah. You're like, I want to go in there. I'm going to crush the art of discipline. I'm going to crush the art of absorbing whatever this company brings to the table. Yeah. And then as I continue to move on in my career, I can bring those skill sets to whatever.
Exactly.
You have to think beyond just like, you know,
the limitations that you've put on yourself. It's funny when you were describing that, I was instantly taken back to a class that I took about reward systems.
Yes.
And there's a book called R Plus. I mean, I might be saying the name, but the concept is about R Plus, which is your reward plus, right? And how there are things that one man's punishment is another man's reward, right? So like some people love being publicly exalted, like, oh my gosh, look at what Kyle did, everybody take a look at what Kyle, and another person's gonna be sitting there being like, please don't say anything public, you will crush me.
Yes.
And I think that's the job of any good leader, is to recognize those types of things and be like, okay, I know my people, I know my team, I know what my friends need out of me for this role, so I can support them in a way that is positive. And you know, in the same way, like finding ways not to necessarily punish people, but to adjust bad behavior to get them to perform.
Yes.
And not in like a super manipulative way, but in a way that is actually supporting them.
Yes.
And, you know, I think of this graph that I saw where like, here's the bare minimum to not get fired. And this is where like 5%, 10%, where a lot of the workforce sits. And then the people who are truly greatly successful in their roles are like 5 times higher, 10 times higher, because to them, it's what you said before. It's not about the money. It's about they enjoy what they're doing. They like it. Right. And, you know, I think
it's just a matter of integrity.
Yeah.
I've had jobs where I don't particularly, I'm not like super passionate about the mission.
Yeah.
But because I'm putting my name to it, I'm going to go all in.
That's your brand, and you're protecting that personal brand. Even if the world's burning down around you, no, I'm going to make the right choice. And I think that's actually a really good point to bring in on your why. Is like, for me, it's faith-based. You know, I have a lot of belief systems, you know, partially through my parents, they're pastors, and somewhat from the music I listen to from like, 5 to 20 years old that is like, about giving your best, giving your all, being the best version of yourself.
Like in the Christian music
in Christian,
field?
secular, like, I'll never forget. I went to a punk show once and, everyone's like moshing and it's like one of the more early days of what I was seeing. And it looks really aggressive and violent. And like literally there was a guy bleeding in the pit.
Yep.
And the band in between songs stood up and talked about why they were involved in the punk scene. And the reason they were involved in the punk scene is because when they were kids, saw the very first group of people who, though they were duking it out in the concert hall, at the end of the day are like, buddy, I love you. What's going on? How can I help you? Like just being supportive and kind to people without being.
Yes, I got a Band-Aid, bro.
Right. Like literally a few years back.
I got you this time. You'll get me next time.
This is probably like 12, 13 years ago. I saw this girl. She couldn't have been taller than 5 feet. Like she was very short, very small, smallest person in the pit. And then this guy, he must have been 6'6", huge. And he was the big guy in the pit. And like, everyone always goes after the big guy.
Oh, yeah.
She did not see him behind her. And she's just swinging her arms and she just shattered his nose. He's bleeding all over. The band stops it. They're like, we good? Like, we good? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. It's my fault. Like the two of them go off to the side. And at the end, like she bought him a beer and everyone was like clapping and like, yeah, they're amazing. I never saw them after that. Maybe they did. Like that's a great way to meet someone.
You're right.
Go break people's noses. Don't.
Accidentally.
But
just do it by accident.
But like watching that scene of being so supportive of one another and seeing people actually care about positivity and growth was really endearing to me. Yeah. And then listening to the music that I listened to, especially my like early teens, 12, 13, 14, sitting there listening to them about like taking on the world and trying to challenge something and being, a force to be reckoned with. And, like you laugh at all the reels and the memes of kids like today's and they're like, me at 14 be like, my life sucks. And like, at the same time you're walking around with like your CD player or early MP3 players that had 128 Ks of space and like, 30 songs and that's what you could listen to.
Oh my goodness. I don't have to listen to what's on the school bus anymore.
Right? Like, thank goodness. And you're walking around and you're like, I'm going to take on the world. I'm going to be amazing. But like, it's funny how that angst can help you drive something. And it's like, okay, yeah, I want to be a solution to a problem to help people. I want to be that, like, lack of a term, that monster that I was like imagining myself to be, that I'm going to take on this world and like I'm going to like no one can take me, I'm going to win every fight. Like that's such a cool aspect that you can build off of with character, with integrity, with that type of stuff.
Yes.
But taking on that challenge is like, I think that's something that is so cool, and that's what entrepreneurship offers. And for me, one of those drivers is that faith, like falling back to a trust in something bigger than myself, falling back to knowing there's a system of integral laws that are important to what drives me, and also helps me recognize that there are people out there who are just trying their best, and that's what matters.
Right.
Are they there yet? Probably not. I'm not there yet. I know you're not. Like,
no, lifelong conversion journey.
Absolutely. Here. And if that's what's driving them to the ultimate redemptive process, okay, who am I to judge?
Right.
Like, literally not my job.
We should get into this. I mean, so where this all intersects for me, as you well know, is like I found a way to harness my inner passions in life, which are very faith-based as well, but they weren't always. I can share that with you if you'd like.
Yeah.
And the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
And it came together in becoming a leader, a founder of a ministry.
Right.
And Dynamis, and you've been to one.
Yeah, it was very cool. The guys are so nice.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, a great group of people, and it was really cool having you too, because obviously you're the son of pastors, so that's a an out for people that know in a Catholic podcast. It's not a Catholic Christian representation. And yet, like, we have so much more in common than our differences.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I mean, we're brothers in Christ, obviously. And, you know, I think I agree with a lot of what you said in terms of, like, as long as people are trying their best, it's like, who am I to judge? 100%.
Yeah.
And I find for me, like, it's this weird dynamic of striking that balance, kind of like in the professional world.
Yeah.
Where between, you know, like meeting people where they're at, but not leaving them where they're at. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the ultimate like evangelization. And then in the terms of a conversation between, you know, faith expressions, like ecumenism, as they say, like ecumenism is the buzzword of like interfaith relations.
Yeah.
But I just find that like finding a way to bring entrepreneurialism and the faith together has been so incredibly rewarding, extremely challenging.
That's an understatement.
Like, I feel like you and I would have a lot that we can relate to in terms of like, you know, there's the quintessential, like the stereotype of being a pastor's kid.
Yeah.
Or pastors, plural, kid, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some of those stories. And also in the Catholic world, like being a layman and doing ministry, that's like a taboo in certain circles.
Right.
Like it's like clericalism. Like, no, if it's not the clergy doing things, like who are you? Who do you think you are? And like, it's like, no, I actually have like authority from the episcopacy, and your own flock doesn't really recognize the value of that sometimes. So there's always like a challenge, even within the faith space,
right,
where you can apply those like business principles and like, in ethics. I like how you just said that, like that is kind of like a part of our compass. Yeah. So, but I mean, there's so much to riff off, man. Like, thank you, Jesus, for the opportunity to, dare I say, like offload a little bit of having to figure some of that out.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine if every human on the planet just like had to completely perfectly define their own moral compass on their own terms?
Oh gosh.
And none of them are going to be perfectly calibrated to each other's.
Right.
Like, what kind of world would that look like?
There's like two people you're kind of like close enough, I guess. That leads into the whole like,
oh man, I got Hitler.
A friend of a friend.
Hitler in my ministry.
Was it an enemy of my enemy is my friend type of? I mean, that would be the world, right? Like,
right.
You'd have a bunch of people just being like, well, close enough. I don't like you. I don't trust you. I don't like your beliefs, but I really don't like them. So
yes, no, that's true. And you'll get into like that mob psychology or like the group think, group mentality, as opposed to individual like responsibility.
Yeah, well, accountability.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's where. I've done a lot of I thinks today, but going back to that accountability and looking at where people are, and as a leader and as someone who is empathetic, like both of us are, where's that boundary of being someone who's just going to trample you, or someone's going to take advantage of you because you're always nice or you're always kind or you're always polite, and holding yourself accountable and holding them accountable instead of just, well, you can continue to come to my house with your dirty shoes on. No, you can come in the house, but take your dirty shoes off. Like that type of stuff. Where's that line? And I think that's where the beauty of friendships like ours is like, yo, Kyle, am I crazy for saying this, or am I crazy for thinking this? And sometimes the answer is, yeah, you are, man. And sometimes the answer is, no, man, but what I'd like to see you develop is a little bit more accountability to yourself or to your people. Right. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm lacking. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I've been to some of our business circles, and you helped me to know the proverbial boogie's hanging out of my nose or whatever. And it's like, that's true friendship. Yeah. It's not to put a strong word on it, but it's like cowardly to like act friendly with people and not help them. Ways.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what kind of friend doesn't help?
Not a friend. Yeah, that's an enemy.
Frenemies. We need less frenemies, man. You know. Some say true. Like keep your enemies closer. It's like, I don't know, man. That's a choice.
I mean, like I prefer to be the 5 people I'm around, rather than trying to keep my enemies close. Although I mean, like one could argue I'm not saying you should, but like
Right.
you could argue that like keeping your enemies close, well, then you're going to become like them, which means gives you an advantage or disadvantage. I mean, however you want to
Yeah, but are you
take on
trying to
that
become like a
perspective.
Machiavellian, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Depends.
it depends. Is that your why?
Yeah. Yeah. Soul check. Right?
Kudos to you, I guess.
And one thing I know both of our faith expressions believe is that we're all a removed grace away from becoming the next Hitler, the next whatever insert enemy. I mean, everybody always thinks of him as the proverbial evil caricature, unless you're Nazi and then you love him. But like, you know what I mean? Like we're all a removed grace away from becoming satanic in whatever expression that looks like.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and
only by
that's
grace of
the
God
thing,
go
like
I.
checking yourself. You know, some of the most beautiful, kind-hearted people I've ever seen have done the most, like, I don't want to say evil or vile things, but like that's kind of where I'm going, where it's like out of their own misguided attempt to being good, they've hurt people really bad.
Yes.
And not in a let me hold you accountable, let me help you hurt, but in a like just absolutely destructive, you know, way. And they don't want to be held accountable to the fact that even though they are a good, nice, kind person, they've done something awful.
Right.
And
if it's unrepentant, I'd go so far as to say that's not a good person.
no, yeah,
I think
I'd agree with that.
We overstate, oh, but they're good, I can vouch for them, even though they're like cohabiting or they're, contracept, whatever the thing is. Like, it's like, no, like if it's what we call mortal sin territory, if it's like objectively speaking, that's a hellbound decision.
Yeah.
Like,
well, the
friendly thing to do is to be like, dude, you've got a really nasty boogie in your nose, man. Like, don't, like, get rid of that and don't ever go back.
Yeah.
Like, once the Red Sea's parted and you've passed it, don't look back.
Well, I hope it's not a bloody nose.
Yeah, no kidding.
But you're right. Like, what is it? The cliche statement, and it's only cliche because everyone says it, is the path to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, and some stereotypes exist for a reason.
And you can take that from an organization, a group of people. You can take that to an individual, and like there's some awesome organizations out there that they lost their mission, they lost their goals, and because they all came together and have great intentions, they failed epically. I mean, maybe I'll be a little bit political here, but I think that there's a lot of universities that are acting that way now, where their intention is still a good intention to get students better jobs, to get them better situated in life, help them navigate life. But the consequences are now they're strapping on tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt for something that's not going to get them anywhere further to succeed in life, whether that's financially or whether that's the way they're thinking, or they're not helping solve a problem. They're just creating more problems by giving them more information.
Yep.
More things to think about, not less.
And as somebody who's philosophically and theologically minded, I mean, it's not lost on me. I've heard not a few criticisms over the years. Like, the first thing that you get hit with is, well, how are you going to make money with that?
Yeah.
How is that going to give you? And it's like, whoa. Let's put knowledge back in its proper context. Yeah. Like, knowledge is its own reward for first of all. But then also, it's like, yes, maybe in this current system, unless you turn around and go become a teacher of that thing, you may not make money. And maybe that's a saturated field. Maybe it's a very competitive field, whatever. I mean, if that's your goal, then you have to navigate those challenges and figure it out. Yeah. Get yourself in there. But at the same token, like, no generation is ever going to change the objective reality that there is a hierarchy of knowledge. Yeah. And like, those are the highest degrees there are. And all it comes distilled down to, and this applies and is relevant to everyone, is that education should be teaching you how to critically think. Yeah. You know, like if what you got out of schooling is knowing how to learn for the rest of your life, right?
Cool.
It's
awesome.
Like, it's like, instead of being given a fish, learning how to fish.
Yep.
So, and that's my concern about what I'm seeing in the educational realm. Yeah. Writ large is If people don't know how to be critical thinkers, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think, like, you know, the challenges now for a lot of academic institutions is things like AI. Instead of fighting it, well, why don't you give someone the tool to use it in a way that is productive, not, well, you can't use this because I said you can't use this. Well, that's only going to cause people to use it, and then you have a deficit of people who can't think because now they just learned how to use a tool.
Yep, Adam and Eve, it's like
right?
back in the garden.
Exactly.
Fruit.
And it could be a resource that really helps people. And like I genuinely, like I use it all of the time, more so for, this is what I'm thinking. Can you organize this in a way so someone else can understand it? Yes. And it's like, oh, just like chronologically or alphabetically organizing this. And it's like, oh, now this makes sense to even me.
Yes.
And then not in a way where I'm creating content that's like, this is doing the thinking for me. No, I want to do the thinking. Just help me get organized.
Right.
Great asset to use tools with, or even, you know, with like the design elements of what AI can do. Awesome stuff.
Yes.
But it's not the end goal. It is a help me get organized. Let me, you know, and you know, there's lots of challenges with that. And I had lucky enough that I had professors that recognized that very early on. Like I was in school when ChatGPT blew up and like everyone was like, oh my God. And then, you know, I also had, you know, I was a TA at the time. I had students turn in papers that was like, yeah, but this historically never happened because you didn't proofread it. You would have caught it. I would have never known, but you didn't even bother to proofread it because it's like, you know, like that type of stuff. And having
expelled, man.
having to sit down and being like, okay, man, like I don't care that you're using this tool. I care about what content you're creating. I care about the end result.
And whether or not you're truly absorbing the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you can't do that unassisted.
Yeah.
Then you know your intelligence is artificial.
Yeah,
like your own intelligence.
Yeah, like and I don't want to go down the like conspiracy theory thing, but like we've never had a lizard as a president.
Okay. Just don't get me canceled,
right? We've never had a lizard who's been the president
that we know of.
That we know of, right? Sure. None of the historic documents have declared this yet. And yet you're trying to say like in 1993 when our lizard president was elected, which wasn't even an election year. And how does this have to do with like the scope of accounting? Right. I'm just unsure about where that went. Like this might be one of the most creative writings I've ever read. Like awesome, but that's not the assigned task for, hey, tell me about the accounting practices of 3M, right? Yes. Like, there's a very big disconnect. And, you know, that type of stuff that's obvious, and will become less and less obvious as technology gets better. But, you know, really focusing back on, can you stop and can you critically think? Can you stop and can you find what are the morals and the values that drive you?
Have you ever seen Ready Player One?
I have.
Spielberg. Okay. Yeah. I think what we're touching on right now is actually going to become much more of a thing.
Oh, I'd agree. Yeah.
Remember the scenes where like the guy's got this AI assisted dashboard and it's like helping him answer questions about 80s music?
Yep.
Because he's trying to convince the other person that he's legit to get access.
Yes. Yep.
But the kid doesn't actually know that stuff. He didn't grow up in that era and he didn't retroactively show interest in it.
Yep.
But because he had access to this artificial information in real time, he was basically like socially engineering, as some would say in cybersecurity parlance, the interaction.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see way more of that
as
time goes on.
I described myself the other day to someone as a little bit of a chameleon, right? Mm-hmm. The world that I've grown up in and the environment that I've grown up in, I've always had to learn to kind of match people's energy, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so
flexing in the disc world, right?
Right. If they're really big and boisterous, I'm like, yeah, man, you're awesome. And then I'm like, walk away and I'm like, man, I'm super tired. Like, why am I tired? Oh, because I'm actually not that big of a personality.
Introvert, needing to charge your battery.
Yeah. And that's doesn't mean like bad things, but like learning to be a chameleon and learning to match people's energy also comes with the consequence of saying, okay, who am I? What drives me? What am I? What am I doing here? And, you know, being that type of social chameleon isn't necessarily a bad thing. But at the same time, it's a great skill set to have when you're at the front desk of a place and you say, "Hi, welcome today." And someone matches you, with, "Wow, hi, welcome today." You're like, "Yeah, it's a great day." And they walk away and you're like, "Okay, yeah, actually it is a good day." Like,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
it comes with its rewards. And, you know, watching that all development and watching less and less people be genuine and authentic with those skill sets. And because they have access to the answers, but not maybe the replication of the excitement and the authenticity.
Yeah, or just really letting the concepts steep within the roots of their own being.
Yeah.
I mean, we were at the beach the other day because, the weather's been breaking out.
It's been beautiful.
Incredible, right? And it broke my heart to see these like moms with their young children, and they're going from the wherever you set down your stuff to the water, taking that awesome walk, like once you've made it to the beach, and they got their phone with them, and they're sitting there doing multiple moms. Yeah, like it was like the norm as opposed to the exception. Yeah, like just chilling on their phone while the kid's sitting there trying to pull on them for their attention. Yeah, and like to take in that preliminary moment of like getting to the water. At the beginning of the season, right? Yeah. Here where we are, like we get all 4 seasons and we're just getting into it. Like, could you imagine like that first time of the year, and like that's going to be the impression that child has from now on, that there's this like false appendage extension of.
I have to laugh because I don't have kids, right?
Sure.
But I have a pet bird.
Okay.
And
so
right, my pet bird also has a relationship with a phone. Which that's a terrible statement to make, but like
there's a lot of questions.
I'd start scrolling through Instagram, and if she likes a post, she lets me know. Like she'll nip at me if I like scroll too fast, or like we watch a lot of bird memes together, and it's funny. This is like, but at the same time, it is very much like, okay, you need a break from this phone, and then it's like, oh wait, I need a break from this phone. Yes. And just being real and authentic. And it reminds me of a story that my brother-in-law shared. He's a pastor up in the Rochester, New York region. He has this sermon series about embracing the awkward. Yes. And he talks about in the very, very first part of what he shares is he talks about a story when he was like 14 or 15 years old. It's the first time he asked a girl on a date, and he was like, "We're going to meet at the ice cream shop." And so I asked her on Tuesday, "Can we meet on Saturday?" And she said yes. It's like, awesome. And he goes, "I think about how awkward it was to ask her, and then I think about it came to Saturday, and I'm just gonna say it was noon. I don't remember the details of the story that well, but like he said, okay, we're gonna meet at the ice cream shop at noon." So he gets there at 11:55, and he's waiting for her, and she doesn't come at noon. And he's like sitting there. He knows all the kids at the ice cream shop who serve. They all saw him ask this girl out, and he's sitting there like, oh no. It's before cell phones. It's before all this. He's sitting there. 12:05 rolls by. He's by himself. He has nothing to entertain himself. He has nothing to like reach out to her. And so he's just like, okay. 12:10 rolls by. 12:15. 12:17. She walks up. She's like, "I'm so sorry. My mom was riding me over here, and we had to stop at the grocery store and pick something up, and then she could drop me off." And he was like, that like 20 minutes of my life was some of the most awkward moments of my life, because I had to sit there going, how long do I stay here before I think that she ditched me? Yeah. And, the reality is, instead of panicking and worrying and doing all the things that, that first person you're asking out, you're excited for, and it's really cute and fun, but like also crazy cringe. Yep. Embracing that moment. Right. And I think as technology and as our kind of social challenges roll along with technology, are we going to teach our kids to embrace the awkward, where it's okay to not know everything, where it's okay to be authentic and genuine with yourself, and be able to process thoughts on your own without having the answer right away.
Yes.
Or, not being entertained in every aspect.
You just touched on something so critical here. So I've taught at Chesterton Academy before, which is a classical education model schooling. And I mean, I can't say enough good things about that. Like the idea of a comprehensive classical education that cohesively develops the child into a critically thinking whole person.
Yeah.
As opposed to what I got, for example, in like college when I was first getting introduced to philosophy. It was this slipshod cookie, like it was like snapshots of a bunch of different thinkers, great thinkers, and how they do things, but there was no cohesion, there was no systematization, and you're just kind of left with this spiritual schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Where you're like, no one tells you what's right,
no
one tells you what's wrong. There's no hierarchy.
Yeah.
And you just like have to figure it out. As opposed to like being able to be given like a stable system or like a
methodical
chronology.
Yeah.
There's a chronology in the way that they do their education. And we would have conversations among the teachers, like how do we best serve these kids in this era of growing technology? And thankfully you have parents that are really on board.
There's a lot of really great parents out there who just go unnoticed.
When they're not like, when you have the public school systems or even certain private school systems that just the parents just treat it like a glorified dropping off at daycare and then whatever, like make sure they're educated and I'm happy, but they're not involved.
Yeah.
That has its own challenges, but the demographic generally is much more invested, involved, and supportive in this model. And so the question becomes, how do we make it so that these children don't have so much access to technology to the point where, and you can't control what happens when they're not in school, but if they're one of those kids that is constantly plugged in, like they're used to being able to like text or use their thumbs or look something up before they respond, and social media. Like when you're an adolescent, you're not even psychologically developed enough to know like to define and rest in and become confident in your own value system. And you're sitting there trying to put pictures up of like what you think other people want you to be. And so what comes with that paradigm, with that complex, if you will, is that if a kid gets put on the spot and they're wrong, they're like, their world crumbles.
Well, always having the answer. And you can argue with all the people who are worried about truth and worried about the right answer and that type of stuff, which I think is really important.
Right. Yeah. If there is an objective truth to be had, depending on the subject.
But I think the beauty of humanity is often not knowing the truth, but going through a process to find it.
Yes.
And
I love the comedians that are like, man, in the 90s, I didn't have to deal with know-it-alls. Like, it's like, I don't know, you don't know. Well, I guess we may never know.
We may never know, right?
Maybe you'll go to the library and go find it out. But now it's like, this is what it really is, man. Right. Like,
and it's so funny because some of the best moments of my life, and I worry about kids in the future, right? I have like 13 nieces and nephews. They're all great kids. The oldest is now in college, the oldest two. And, I worry about their own development of finding themselves because they have the answer right there all of the time. And just because you know an answer doesn't mean that you've digested it as truth, right? Like that's the difference between like your head knowledge and your heart knowledge. Right. I know I shouldn't drink too much. But I don't know drink too much, right? Like, it's like, okay, the knowledge is like, okay, these are the bad things. But also at the same time, you think of the other people who are like, okay, have a glass of wine. It's good for your heart. Like, all right, you're just torn in all these two different truths, right? Like conflicting really information. It's really bad for you.
Yeah.
And
seesaws constantly.
At what point is too much? What point is too little? Like, okay, I don't know. Right. But the only way you figure out what that is if you're comfortable drinking. I know there's a lot of people who don't, and that's cool. I came from a family who didn't, and you don't really figure it out until you go, Yeah, 2 glasses was too much for me. 3 glasses was way too much for me, right? Like, you have to figure it out, and you have to figure out what's that truth there. And the reality is, like, going all the way back to that beginning is like questioning things for yourself of what's my why?
Right.
What are the fundamental things that I have learned in my pile of mistakes that have momentously projected me into this position? And how am I going to allow this to help me going forward?
Right.
And absorbing it from up here to down here.
Yes.
That's the awkwardness. That's
the
process that makes life beautiful.
Yes.
It's hard. It's a challenge. It's not fun all the time. But at the end, that reward system of being like, oh, actually, I get that. Holy cow, man.
Yes. Yeah, and with those kids in the adolescent stage, from high school on, you can start giving them abstract thinking, philosophy, if you can plant those seeds early. And then you just got to put kids on the spot. We utilize the Socratic method, which is like, asking questions to get them to think for themselves. It goes back to what you said earlier, actually. You were saying, like, one thing that's great about having a good cohesive friendship or professional partnership is, like, people that can reward you, the reward plus you mentioned. Like, that harkens me back to just good old-fashioned Aristotle. Aristotle in his exhortations on rhetoric, he's all about it's towing that line with not being manipulative or God forbid Machiavellian or dark triad garbage, but like it's the art of persuading someone, and even if they think it was their own idea, whatever, great, that was a good idea, bro. Like, but that is a way that we can help people. And this stuff is ancient. It's nothing new under the sun, right? Ecclesiastes 1. And so, but it's just, it all goes back to like meeting people where they're at, but not keeping them where they're at. And with that, I mean, let's maybe we can put some more flesh on the whole, like the faith-based stuff. Like, do you want to take turns like identifying ourselves in terms of like where our faith journey was? Like, I don't even know if you ever had like an agnostic or an atheist bent, or if it was always believer.
When it comes to my story, I guess, I grew up, I was born to a pastoral family. My mom and dad have been in the ministry since before I was born. And grew up in a pretty, how do I describe this? Pentecostal flavored, but without the rigidity of what is Pentecostalism. So it was always more on the non-denominational, teetering, pretty accepting of other denominations always. Like my dad, one of his best friends is a Baptist pastor, which is like super fun. You sit around and hear some interesting theological debates.
That's the one true faith.
To each their own. But I sit around and like I like every aspect of Christianity that I've come across has had strengths and weaknesses, right?
Sure.
And it's kind of chew the meat, spit out the bones type of mentality. Collecting everyone's story and everyone's journey and how God has come through on that for them has been very fascinating for me. And it's funny to me to see how people have fallen into the denomination that has helped them grow the most. And I like to see it as more God has drawn them to what they needed to go through. I ultimately believe that God has a good and perfect plan for every person. And I think that aspects of Christianity and all the different denominations and all the different things are different skill sets that have impacted people for the positive. I have to choose to think that way, because otherwise you can get lost in here's some obscure fact from 1690 that makes us different, and we're going to argue for the next 400 years. No, it's not. Like, to me, maybe it's like I'm not really that argumentative as an individual anyways.
Right. Or it's like, why is that the hill to die on?
Exactly.
How much does what happened back then really affect us today?
Like, one of my best friends is Orthodox. And then I have you as a Catholic, and I'm kind of in the branch of Christianity where people are like, oh man, they're swinging from the chandeliers and they're screaming things. And it's like, okay, has that happened? Probably. Does that happen at every service? No. And also like,
picture it didn't happen.
Like exactly.
You gotta have a live stream, right?
I don't. We did.
Mega church, or are we talking?
Oh, we're talking like 30 people in my church right now. Yeah, not a mega church. We're associated with a couple really big churches, amazing teams, amazing people, but almost all of them are.
By your outreach and the multi-country
scale.
For
like such a small church, we've impacted like 17 nations that I can think of off the top of my head.
That's dope.
It's incredible. But my faith journey kind of, I remember being in a conference when I was 5 or 6 years old and then kind of realizing that I needed something in my life and that something was Jesus. I was like, oh, okay.
So you were like a hardcore atheist until you were 6?
Oh, until I was 6, man. I was out on the streets, protesting every branch of Christianity. My pastor parents had to drive me there and my milk carton to stand on. But like,
just be 17 minutes late.
Right? Don't be late. Yeah, that'd be very awkward. We lived actually right next door to our church, and I spent most of the early 90s going to church multiple nights a week, whatnot. And then it kind of like clicked when I was 5 or 6. Was it incredibly deep? Like, holy cow, I realized all these things. No, but it's been a journey since then. I was homeschooled for most of my life. So I didn't have to deal with the public school or private school or the drama of lots of that stuff, but I had other experiences.
Was brutal.
Yeah.
In terms of spiritual well-being.
Yeah. I think
I've heard priests say that it's like categorically impossible to take your kids to public school without handing them over to Satan.
I'd have no clue.
Yeah.
Didn't go through it, and I don't have kids.
I'm not taking a position on that, but it's just like that's one of those like that seriously challenges the status quo to throw something like that out there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That would be like with our business talk earlier. You'll get people that are like, why do you even give resumes to people? Like, there's people that have transcended that game and get the best jobs.
Yep.
But you have to at least explore.
Yeah. In order to get in, sometimes you have to play the game.
Right.
But I didn't have that academic challenge, right? I was homeschooled. I performed really well on like the standardized tests. By like 7th, 8th grade, I was post high school in every category.
Well, that's actually the norm.
Yeah,
with homeschoolers, children, they're at the absolute top of education usually.
Yeah,
it's like there's something incredible there.
Well, I think it has to do with. Well, I'm not even gonna go down that path. There's so many good things. There's also a lot of bad things.
Sure, like anything, you got pros and cons.
Yep.
Benefit risk analysis.
So then I think somewhere around 8 years old is the first time my parents took me international. I got to go to Germany. Went and we did a mission trip to Berlin. And when I say like mission trips, I know that comes with a lot of like challenges for people where they're like, oh my God, Matt's a white savior. And it's like, okay, like not exactly. The way that my parents have always run things is they are super supportive of local missions, whether that's in Buffalo or whether that's anywhere in the world. They care about organizations that impact people and are by nationals for nationals. So, we're not trying to go and impose our American Christian ideals or our capitalistic ideals on. Right, exactly. And like I've been accused of that more than once in my life. And so thus me bringing it up.
Bro, we need to dedicate a whole episode to like PK
scars. PK scars. Oh man. I'll be there for that one. But
God bless you, man. I'm sure there's a lot. All joking aside, the slings and arrows and the aspersions that get casted upon leaders.
Yeah. And their kids.
As a lay leader myself, I know
and
what
their
it's
kids.
And their kids. Oh my goodness, man. The things my children have already been put through.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, I'll make fun of you, but like,
don't come after.
Don't go after the kids, man. No, don't be.
You don't want to see Mama or Papa Bear.
Well, really even then, don't. They're innocent. What did they do to you? Right? Like, what did they do to you? Nothing. Mm-hmm. been there. And, you know,
from
my
a young age.
Yeah.
Like what? How old? If you don't
like,
mind my, it's a personal question, but like, how old were you when you started noticing
the
slings that your parents took?
Well, I remember being 6 and some family invited me and my sisters over for dinner after church, and you know, my sisters were older. They're all like 10 years older than me, except for one. Sure. And them being like, do mommy and daddy fight? And like, you know, like digging for dirt so that they could have the upper hand over their pastoral leadership.
You run into that a lot.
You know, like that's the scummiest thing you can possibly do.
Wow, and you still remember that from 6?
Yeah,
that
I mean,
tells
like
you a lot.
it happened more than once, and so it's like that was the first time I really remember it. But like, yeah,
you know what would be super cool? I thought of this while you were speaking entrepreneurially earlier, like all the different like Myers-Briggs and everything out there. Wouldn't it be super cool to like standardize like a 7 deadly sin assessment?
That would be actually really interesting,
dude. Wouldn't it? Like it's just okay: lust, greed, gluttony, sloth, wrath, envy, pride. Like
the ones like you're all of them. You are the problem.
Well, I do think in particular you could probably assess. This is just spitballing here from what I've run into with people that want to get a one up on you.
Yeah,
and because you'll get the people with high levels of narcissism.
Yeah,
and sometimes you're like, I don't know if we have the resources to help this.
Yeah.
And I think obviously all Ecclesiasticus, it's one of the 7 books that we also have in our Bible that 10:15 states that all sin is rooted in pride. So we know it's all pride, but then envy and greed.
Yeah.
I feel like
there's various aspects of that.
Could be notes of wrath, anger, whatever, that might fuel someone's decision. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the envy especially and greed are what cause people to want to behave in that way.
Right. And I think
there's remedies for that.
I mean, like, I'll challenge kind of that thought of like, is there really a solution? Well, ultimately there is. There is a hope and a glory in what God can do for people.
Right. And we're his instruments.
And we're his instruments, and also the trust factor that the entire reason of the Bible is this redemptive arc, right? Bringing you back to the core of God so loved the world. God so much created this to be in relationship with people, even the people like that. Or even the people of any type of creed or challenge that you don't get along with. Like, trusting that God has a plan that is to redeem them to his heart. That's really hard for me with some people. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
And, you know, I look at the people who did things like that to me as a kid. Like, I don't want to pretend that I've overcome that, but it lays into a lot of the rest of the parts of my story of like being a teen and, you know, starting to wonder about that stuff. And then ultimately as a missionary in several countries full-time for, I think, like 3 years, not all consecutive, but in different countries, a year each, coming home and being disillusioned and being cynical about the disappointment in people, right? I alluded to that before. And for a long time, I really got stuck on this idea of being like, you know, love is an obligation. It's not really a thing. And is it really human? I don't know. Right. And then kind of going from that, and my thought process kind of got a little bit lost in the, well, I no longer believe in love. And that's a challenge, because if you don't believe in love, and the Bible straight up says God is love, and it's like, where do I stand here?
Well, when you say it's not really a thing other than an obligation, just to put some flesh on that, do you mean like you just lacked seeing the organicness of it, therefore you question whether it's even there? Or
I lost focus of the goodness.
Okay.
Right? You get overwhelmed with life. You get overwhelmed with just the truly crappy things that people do to you. And the beauty with logic is sometimes logic helps you overcome things. The bad side of logic is sometimes you can process something and logically see every factual thing. You know, why do people get married? Well, it makes life easier for you because when you get old, you need kids to take care of you. Right. Okay. Well, you also need someone to bide your time with and support things. And how are you going to run a household without someone who's right there with you?
Right.
Okay, well, you can logically dissect that and say, well,
Where's the love?
Where's love? It's obligation and it's needs based and it's okay.
Personal outcomes,
right?
You're trying to get something out of it.
And then, like, I love the book The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis, right? It's not very long, but like he talks about
storge, philia, eros.
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to the ancient Greeks.
Yeah. And that's where exactly he goes straight there, and how you need them all in your life. It's not one, right? The beauty of the Christian belief system and the beauty of English as a language is like we use love for all of them. Also, the challenge of using that is like I love tacos versus I love my wife are two very different.
100%.
Like,
100%.
Grammatically, they're the same, but
yes. And there's a place for it all, right? Storge, like it's like caring about your kids, but with a personal, I don't know, selfish like motive being there.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah,
like that bond. That familial bond needs to be there. Of course, philia, that's what you and I have.
Yep.
Right? And it's okay to have eros.
Yep.
I mean, passions are great. As long as they're channeled and they're not at the forefront, and they're not in the driver's seat.
Yep.
Right? Because prudence is the charioteer of the virtues. You need your intellect to be the king.
Yeah.
Not your passions.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people...
They flip them. Yeah.
Usurp the kingdom.
Yep.
And then it's just anarchy.
Where you lose focus on truth, right? And then, I mean, that's even the great point to bring me back to my story is like, I got dark for a while. Yeah. I would have never said, I don't believe in God. I would have never said, oh, I don't this or that. But I was laying in a bathtub every night hoping to die, right? Like sitting in the pitch black, just being like, something needs to change.
Yeah.
I'm done with this. Like, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. I don't want this. And it was
how old were you?
I was my mid-20s.
Mid-20s. Yeah, if you reach that point where you're not, it's like the oxygen coming down in the airplane.
Yeah.
If I'm not being nourished or taken care of, or my relationship with God is on the rocks, or my understanding of it, how am I going to continue serving?
Yeah. And I sit there and I go, okay, well, I've had a great foundation. I've had an incredible family. I've had an incredible life experience. I looked back and realized I lost focus of the goodness in life. I lost focus of the people in my life. I lost focus of all of those things. And when I started to shift that type of thinking, which didn't happen overnight, I'm still on that journey. It's been like 8 or 9 years of this. And it's like, okay, nope, we're not going down that path. Building that discipline of being like, okay, no.
Get behind me, Satan.
Literally. It's a challenge. It's not easy. And I've had people kind of on flip sides be like, oh, it's your faith that is your problem. I've had other people be like, well, you just need to define your faith a little bit more, or you need to learn more about your faith. And it's like, no amount of theology can help you with this.
Head to the heart.
Yep.
Yep.
The only thing that helps head to heart is experience, accountability, and trust.
Amen. Brother.
And it's like, okay, have I arrived? No. Yeah. Am I on the journey? Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Well, there's something to be said for being the wounded healer that's still got the scarring taking place.
Yeah.
As opposed to being the wounded healer that's, truly shored up.
Yeah.
And then can help. We're post-fall, post-lapsarian men, as they say.
Right.
And so it's okay to be where we are now. Will we be this way forever? No. Mm-mm. But, I mean...
But that's the beauty of the journey.
Yes.
Right? Like, I made this sarcastic comment last night to my buddy that the only time you're perfect is, like, the second you die. Like, you work your whole life to, like, really try your best and do the right thing and get to know God and get to know people. And then he's like, all right, time to come home. Like, it's a little bit sarcastic. Yeah, there's a joke in there. But, like,
sure.
Also, it's a little bit of an element of truth. Like, the coolest people that I can think of are, like, in their 90s. their entire life has been full of just these like hellish moments, just awful things, and they have kids and they're focused on just being, hey, how's life? Well, got some struggles, but it's another beautiful day.
Right.
Looking up, oh, it's sunny today. Oh, it's rainy today. And still just being appreciative of them both.
Yes.
And being like, okay, yeah, like, you go and you start talking about, oh, I'm really challenged in work and like this challenge, or like, entrepreneurship, and like, oh, I'm going to make money or this or that. And they're just kind of like, that's nice, dear, but how are you?
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah.
One of those deep moments like that is when I ended up on my conversion journey, actually.
Yeah.
As an adult. Hugely. A Methodist brother in Christ, actually, was the one who really shook me out of my complacency.
Yeah.
At the time. And I mean, that's a deep story. I don't know if today's the day to reveal that, but yeah, I can empathize deeply with what you're saying. I would say that the vast majority of people don't reach spiritual perfection before they pass.
No,
it goes back to many are called, but few
are chosen, and
but
believing in the redemptive arc of God. Like,
right.
I was the thief on the cross who joined me and will be in heaven today.
Yes.
Was he intellectually or theologically perfected? No.
For me, theology came way later than the experience.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing.
Well, the Beatles were the same way in their music, right? Like they didn't learn theory until after they were a superstar band.
Well, there's that. I mean, and I'm just the worst sinner on earth, but like, it's funny because when people come into your life at a snapshot in time where they only know you as whatever the thing is, they're like, that's who you are, or that's what they identify you as. Like lately I've been getting a lot of, you have the gift of knowledge. And I'm like, thanks be to Jesus. Like that came recently. Like, and
I made a lot of mistakes to get here.
And they don't recognize but also, and again, Mary is huge in the life of a practicing Catholic, and like, she saved me, really. Mm-hmm. She brought me to her son. And like, I always like to remind people, especially like the intellectually heavy people, like, let us never forget who Our Lady tends to come to with these like church approved apparitions. It's the poor, uneducated peasant, often children. Yeah. Right. And I know that our non-believers can try to beat us up for that and be like, oh, so that those are your sources of authority. But let us never forget, right, like that the way into heaven is through the mind of a child. Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for that, like purity,
the innocence.
Innocence. Yeah. And like the more educated you are, that'll become the source of your downfall if you're not careful. The more beautiful you are. Yeah. I think there's something in the Old Testament about that like being really beautiful is actually considered a curse. Yeah. It's like, you got to be careful. Yeah. Like, like these things that we think are our strengths. Yeah. It's like, if your ego's not in check, be careful.
It's hard to be as good looking as we are.
My man, this doesn't come easy, No.
I think I was telling you earlier that, yesterday I was sitting at the front desk at work and some guy walked by and was like, I don't know what you do, but you're looking great at it. Yeah. I was like, no.
Yeah. You look pretty.
You look pretty. I think that is what he said. Yeah. You look pretty. Thanks.
We're both like, I
forgot to shave.
We started this thing. Let's just go,
little smell.
Come as you are. Yeah, there's no smell-o-vision yet, thank God. So, yeah, they're off the hook on that one. But
awesome.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that there's so much value that people can pour over just from this like introductory bridge building exercise that we're doing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like there's
find the commonality and you'll be shocked.
Yeah.
You'll be shocked.
Start there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like so I want to riff a little bit off of and thank you so much for your testimony, by the way.
Thank you.
Like that's deep. Like you had those dark moments.
Yeah.
Moments where you want to give up.
Yeah.
Moments where you genuinely are like, my entire ethos of what I was raised in is like being called
crumbling around me.
Yes. Serious question from the fundaments.
Yeah.
Like, am I on rock? Am I on sand?
Don't know. Only way is to spend the time, go through the process.
It's wild. And yeah, man, I've been there too. Yeah. And it's weird when you're the wounded healer and all of a sudden you're not on solid ground or you don't know if you are.
Yeah.
And it's like, am I a living lie? Am I a hypocrite? Yeah. Like what? Like all of that is just brutal to go through, and in the Catholic world, man. Like, like you said, there's pros and cons in all the denominations. And of course, we're not a denomination by its definition, because to denominate is to come out of something else.
Yeah.
And it's at the root, but still, like, I think where our challenges are today are on that human level.
Yeah.
Because you need to be able to make that distinction between, like, the divine bride of Christ, which is spotless. And you think of the Song of Songs and all of that.
Yeah.
But then there's the, like, you know, Judas was in the church from the beginning.
Right.
Like, that's...
Well, my dad always says this. This is one of my favorite quotes from him. He's like, if you find a perfect church, you should probably leave because you joined it. And it's like, actually,
ouch.
Oof, that hurts.
No, that's a good ego check.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And well, that reminds me of Mother Angelica. She was like the foundress of EWTN, that Catholic media apostolate. And she has a great one. She was known for like quippy one-liners. Yeah. One of hers is like, we'd all be saints if it weren't for people. Like, you know, like, and it's true. It's like, but we have to smooth out each other's rough edges.
Yep.
And, you know, another thing that people like misunderstand when they get to know me is, because you only get to know someone in one snapshot in time.
Yeah.
Is like, you know, it's not easy towing that delicate balance of wanting so badly to, like, if you feel like you feel or think that you have found something that is like the fullness of truth, let's say. Yeah. And if you're a good friend, you're going to want to share that with everybody. Yep. You're going to want to shout it from the rooftops. And to me, that is Catholicism. Right. Straight up. You know, you already know me offline. Yeah. Like, I'm unapologetic in that regard. Yeah. But at the same token, like, if I'm wielding my testimony, which is all I am, all I can know, all of that, that I can speak of, right? And if you want to just call it my truth as opposed to the truth, however anybody processes it, like, my authentic story is one of extraordinary challenge, abuse, like reception from a young age. And like, I'm the quintessential person that if you ever were like, you know, what do you represent? You'd probably expect me to not be this. Yeah. And like, and that comes with the challenges and the wounding of like those evil people know I still exist. Yeah. They don't want me to. Yeah. You know, like they, and it's like, but wait a minute, like, we're on the same team. Like, I love you. Yeah. I forgive you. Yeah. Like, what do you mean? And so some people have to like wrestle with that. But then like you'll get other like non-Catholics that are like, why would you ever want to be a part of something so corrupt? Right. And to that, I'm like, I mean, that's kind of like why I'm in it. And like the longest ruling dynasty in human existence is the Chinese Zhou dynasty, Zhou. They were around like, I want to say like 800 and I don't know, 90 something years, whatever it is. And 800, 900 years. And that's it. That's the longest running thing ever. And then you look at the Catholic Church and it's 2,000 years, warts and all. Yeah. And I, you know, on the human side, of course, warts. And like, that to me is just this like, I can't even wrap my feeble mind around that. Like, why have people been trying to take you out from without and from within from the beginning, and yet you're still here?
Well, I think that's one of the beauties of understanding history. Yeah. Seeing the generations that came before you with all of their mistakes, right? Like the traction of what past work has done. And the beauty of saying like, you know, okay, in 1,000 years, hopefully people have built upon not my legacy, but part of the role of what I've played in this thing that is bigger than me. Yes. One of my conditions with starting my own startup was I told every person on the team that if you're going to join, you have to be involved with something bigger than yourself. And I don't care what that is. For me, it's faith. It's working with my parents. It's working in the church. It's sharing my life. Right. Also, part of a non-for-profit 501c3 that does disaster and humanitarian relief, right? Like, it's really big part of my life. But I don't care if you want to go and work with the pet shelter at the local corner. Just be involved with something bigger than yourself where you're giving. And you'd be shocked at what results you get. And, you know, 2,000 years of history of the Catholic Church, how cool. And I think one of the coolest things about our friendship is like neither one of us are trying to convert each other to each other's team or
Dude,
branch,
my team's got
right?
A lot
like
of issues, man.
right.
Like,
Well, mine too.
Home.
Yeah, like my
you're
team.
Welcome home anytime.
Right.
You know, just for me, it's like make sure, like, if you're gonna make a decision like that, let it be based on the most objective truths.
Yeah,
and, you know,
and a fundamental guidance by God saying, "This is where I've placed you. This is where I've rooted you."
Right.
And you know, you don't get to choose what garden you're planted in.
Right. That's right.
God chooses that for you. And I think the beauty of it is like coming alongside and saying like, okay, objectively, I can talk about this with a friend who understands the challenges. Maybe they don't live so close to the challenges that it's like, now I'm so overwhelmed. It's like, you know, that's not the point. But the point is, okay, in our friendship, are we drawing each other closer to God? Are we drawing each other closer to Christ? And are we objectively trying to build a better future and becoming better versions of ourselves through Christ? That's what matters.
Yes.
And it's like, okay. And I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that. I know that there's a huge movement in Europe that is really reconciling. That's where the original rift started. So why wouldn't the healing be there? And, you know, it's becoming a global thing where kind of North America is the last challenge frontier of people coming together and saying, no, what branch I'm from doesn't matter. What are the roots?
Yeah.
And growing together, growing more Christ-like, and being better people.
Yeah. Yes.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, with the spectrum that I described of the different like beliefs that I had, that I explored throughout my faith journey, like one phenomenon that I've noticed that I struggle with within our home camp, if you will, is, you know, especially when you get more on the traditional side, there's like traditional and charismatic, if you will. You know, obviously conservative, liberal, those are helpful to a point sometimes. They don't translate into the faith as much as they do in politics. Yeah. But, you know, all of that's there. And sometimes when you'll get people that are more like Puritan or purists, or they think that the fullness of the truth means something specific and they want to hunker down on it, and they want to protect that to the point where they start like looking with like paranoia or just, you know, us and them mentality. Yep. And for those who are not like us, and I don't care what flavor of Catholicism or what flavor of any faith tradition you're from. Yeah. To me, like, because I was, you know, I considered myself a Hindu at one point. Like, I was open to all of them. Zoroastrianism, like, I found myself looking at them all and being like, does your belief system even give like energy to trying to bring other people to it? Yeah. You know, like the conversion, the proselytism, whatever you want to call it. And for some of them, it's like, nope, like not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit.
Like in most versions of Judaism, like I've heard, like if someone really goes out of their way to be like, I want to become converted to Judaism, they'll like go through that process with you. Yep. But they're not like actively seeking new membership. Nope. You know, like, and, you know, and you can go down the line, and I'm like, well, if you're so insular to the point where you're like, and I'm back in Christianity at this point, but like to where you're like, we got to figure it out, and everyone else is an infidel, or everyone else is a heretic, or what, like these like intense words. Yeah. Like,
I think I've shared with you before. There's a meme somewhere out there, and I never have access. One of these days when I come across it, I need to just save it on my phone, but I never have access.
Oh, we need to make our own memes.
It is.
What are you saying?
What are you saying? It's my branch of Christianity.
I'm so sorry. What was the meme?
The meme is some professor standing somewhere and saying, in 1967, this is when we got Christianity right, and everybody else was wrong. Yes. And I'm like, 67? Like, what particularly was great about 1967 that made anything, you know, fun times socially, politically, pop culture, sure, but like, in the grand scheme of things, like, that's when we got Christianity right?
Yes.
Like, no, man, it's a journey.
Well, the book nerd in me, like I remember one of those 3 Christian sects that I mentioned to you. Like I would go in their library.
Yes.
I'm like doxing myself for any
Right.
non-Catholic that ever brings me somewhere. They're gonna be like, he's gonna do this now. But like, it was organic. I'm like, dude, all these books, let me check them out.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but to notice the pattern recognition that the vast majority of the books on the shelf were like Martin Luther and after.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but wait a minute, like, what about the rest of it?
What about the rest
like
of it?
Augustine, Jerome, like all
Right.
of that? And I couldn't find it.
Right.
And I was just like, this seems like a memory hole. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But
Well, it's kind of one of the funny aspects of what divided Christianity was the printing press.
yeah,
And it's like,
1992,
you go, okay,
1492,
well,
1517.
why wasn't there anything before? And it's like, well, Martin Luther kind of came around and was like, hey, listen, this was a really good idea. We should get the word out. And it's like,
Yes.
say what you will about other aspects of his life, but like that fundamental idea, it took Christians hundreds of years to become united on.
Right.
I was like, oh. And now we don't even question it. And now we have people just writing there like, I had a Diet Coke on Facebook or wherever on social media, and they're like, hey, had a Diet Coke, feeling great. And we're like, wow, I should have a Diet Coke. They're a great Christian. Like,
Yes.
what?
No, it is. It's branding.
It
right?
is.
I mean, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of that.
There's almost too much writing now, but like at the same time, like what has happened has been fundamentally good for humanity and good for the faith.
Yeah, I get nervous when he calls the Epistle of James and the Book of Revelation of straw, because he removes some books and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But not to turn it into like
No, it's not a theological debate, but like it's like
no, not at all.
But the fundamental idea and the well-intended moment of just write stuff down. It's okay.
And being able to read.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the vast majority of Christians up until that point, a lot of them were not articulate. They were not able to read, and that's why you had a lot of sacred art and different things to inform. And like anything, with any like power differential.
And there's still an aspect of that
struggle.
globally. Like, there's still a lot of people who are illiterate. People don't read.
Yes.
And it's important to be able to communicate things in simple terms.
Yes.
And I mean, humans are humans, and we're very visual creatures.
Right. And that speaks also to the fact that you don't need to be able to read a Bible to be a believer.
Yeah.
Right? The faith is simpler than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's the sky's the limit, man, for what we can do next.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, and I really appreciate your servant's heart.
Thank you.
Because 100%, man. Even if someone, let's just say we've got non-believers that are still listening to us for whatever reason, right? Like, we love you.
Here we are. You've seen us duel. We've done it all.
Come home to the Lord. But like, let's say you don't even want to have that spiritual conversion opportunity in your life.
Yeah.
Even if you're just thinking like entrepreneurially, let's say, right? To tie it, bring it all
back
circle.
to the beginning.
Like, even if you're just operating on a narcissism empathy scale, like, it really, really helps with the negative aspects of the narcissism side to put yourself out there and to serve the other.
Yeah. Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, or even if it's to bring temperaments into it, the precursor of the Myers-Briggs, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're a choleric, a sanguine, a melancholic, or phlegmatic, like let's say you're more on the melancholic side of things, or just an introspective person, like it can get depressing to turn in on yourself when you're going through a lot, or when you've got challenges, or you've got deep questions. Yeah. And maybe you can speak to that. I mean, because you went through that dark moment, but you're clearly crushing it in life. And you've overcome that stumbling block that the enemy attempted against you. Yeah. And you became a stronger man because of it. Yeah. And part of it, I'm sure, is turning to others and like being Jesus for them.
Yeah. I think it's being vulnerable to the right people. I mean, that's very key.
Yeah, not like the quintessential like clinical narcissist.
No.
People in our
lives.
lives.
Be like, hey, I'm really hurting, and then they take advantage of you.
Right.
But having people that you can trust, and even if it's just that one person, if you don't have anyone in your life, maybe go find someone, even if it's a professional, just to get that well uncapped, for lack of a term. get the fresh water flowing,
Yes.
you know, challenging your own. I think a lot of people know their own shortcomings. And sometimes you hyperfixate on them, and that's a challenge, you know, especially if you're the more introspective, melancholic type of individual. Right. But I think ultimately, Christian faith or not, focusing on the good in life and just taking it one day at a time, right? Like if you can do those things, I'm not going to sit here and promise your life is going to be better, but if you're disciplined enough in your perspective, things will change. That's what I had to learn. You know, there's still days where I'm like, I don't want to go to work, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. Right. Is what it is. But, you know, get that well going. Get that traction going. Get that goodness focused. And you'd be surprised at how your life starts going in the right direction. You know, hopefully, I mean, for me, I mean, the reality is that it should be Christ focused, and I should hope that people find that and are lucky enough to recognize that need.
Yeah, well said.
And at the same time, I'm not going to sit around pretending to force people into my type of belief system when I've had the challenges that I've had. But I've also had the payoff and the depth of it paying out for me. And heck yeah, man, I'm lucky to go through that. And I get to go and talk to my Orthodox friends. I get to talk to my Pentecostal friends. I get to talk to my Catholic friends, my Baptist friends, my people, right?
Yes.
And I'm a lucky man. And I think that was the thing for me that really had to change. I lost focus of that. Once I started shifting that perspective in my head, and it's not like I did it on my own. Obviously, God helped me get through that. Things started kind of resolving themselves. And that feels like a cop-out of an answer. Like, oh yeah, just do these things. And it's not a formula. It's an experience.
Well, I think you touch on a really important point there, though, too, right? Because some people might throw it back at me if I'm like, well, if you're going through a lot, just go help people. And they'll be like, doesn't that betray the whole, like, oxygen mask? Put your zone on before you help others.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to...
Absolutely.
Because if you mean well, like we said about the road to hell, if you mean well, but you're actually causing damage, no one wants that.
Nope.
That's not a wounded healer. That's just
hurting people,
at that point.
Yeah.
And we want to avoid propagating the cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
Because we're all abusers.
Exactly.
If we're being honest with ourselves. All men fall short of the glory of God in that regard, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's super interesting, man.
Yeah.
So how did you, when you went through that growth and you came to that realization, how did you like strike that particular balance where it's like, you know what, I just got to get my head back in the game. I got to pour my heart out to others and make sure that I'm doing it in a way that's beneficial?
It honestly wasn't a singular moment.
Right.
It was that I started to recognize that I was hurting people around me. And you know, there's still aspects of regret of that. I'm not going to pretend that I'm sitting around and be like, yep, everything worked out. Like, no, like,
sure.
You know, I hurt some people and I'm not proud of that. But
of course,
at the same time,
every saint has a past, just like every sinner has a future.
Right.
And, you know, we're no better than like St. Paul, King David.
Yep. And, you know? And like looking at those stories and going, okay, if they could do it, I can do it. It's not an overnight, wow, I had an epiphany and everything changed after this singular moment. No, it was like, okay, 9-10 months went by. I was like, okay, I got a little bit better in my thinking in this process. Now I got this to work on, you know, and not trying to bite everything off at once.
Yeah, I think that's what our generation and the Zoomers coming up have had to figure out. Because we uniquely are the generation that grew up in the 90s where there was no internet entertaining us.
Nope.
Right? And then, then it
all
was,
of a sudden,
it
was like 4 years. It went from like dial up to,
oh my goodness.
like, I know it was a
DSL
lot longer of that
broadband,
process until
T1,
all of a sudden,
crazy.
Bam.
Yep.
And then every answer you needed was there. And every problem that creates was also there.
And even before that existed, we all had to be really careful, right?
Mm-hmm.
To recognize we are not the savior, right? There's only one savior.
Yep.
And even though we're his instruments and we're called to be like him in all ways, even to perfection, Matthew 5:48, like, you know, don't go picking up crosses on the battlefield that aren't yours. You have a custom designed cross. And like, now with the age of the internet, it's like if I make those big blunders, it's like
amplified.
The whole world is on my shoulders.
Can you believe him?
Yeah.
He thinks that's blue.
Yeah.
That's definitely royal blue. So sorry that I've upset this entire world.
You upset the planet.
The entire planet knows. Is the dress white and gold or yellow and gold or black and blue? I don't know.
Oh my God. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right? And people have commented on it and
it's peanut butter jelly
somehow
time,
lost their careers. Okay, cool. I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to.
No, but it's
that,
serious.
right? Yeah.
Kids get suicidal because
they were wrong
bullying,
or they were right.
Or there's a perceived wrong.
Yep.
And we need to be able to multiply all of the truisms that were always there, but also set these healthy boundaries of like, you don't have to take the world on your shoulders. Yeah. And if you made a mistake, like you still have a future as a saint. Yeah. Yep. You know? Yep. Like, just because we all think it's different because the internet's here, it's not. Mm-hmm. This is all the parameters are still as they were back in King David's time.
So true.
You know what I mean?
So true.
It kind of takes the pressure off if you allow it to. Yeah. Like,
I think that if I was to summarize the conclusion to that entire story, I mean, starting from the very beginning, you know, I think a lot of my help was figuring out what was my why. I didn't know that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. Right. Finding my why. Finding the goodness and finding my people, right? I've been lucky enough to go through that process. There's a lot of people who are at various stages of that process, and sometimes they're finding their people first, and then they're finding their why, and then they're finding what drives them.
Right, the good to focus on.
Yeah.
That's super interesting, man.
But that was the process I had to go through.
Wow.
Right? Like, I kind of started with the why, not intentionally, and it wasn't until years later that I could even articulate that. And business school helped me with that, honestly.
Right.
You know, having the right professors being like, well, what are you doing? What is your career goals? I've been through 6 years of business school, and I still don't know what my career goals are. But you know what I know? I got my why. That's what matters. You know, it's like what you were saying, like, you know, can you learn the skills to learn for life? Yeah, that's what I had to learn. I didn't know that's what I needed to learn.
And you know what? God's infinite.
Yeah.
And he's super, super interesting. So, like, he'll break the paradigm on any of us just to make an example out of us in our life stories. And I mean that in a very good way, in an interesting way. Yeah. Like, writing the divine script of the human experience. And, you know, what you're reminding me is about how we always say, like, you need to know God so that you can love God, so that you can serve God, right? And that is the general normal order of operations. That being said, you're never guaranteed that you're not going to be plopped number 2, number 3 as your initial taste of conversion or whatever the thing is. And, you know, also we all strive for, you know, the transcendentals you hear about, like truth, goodness, and beauty. Yeah. That's where your mind brought me to when you were like, I need to figure out my why. Yeah. Right? That's like knowledge. You know, I want to focus on some goodness and I want to find my tribe. I think it's beautiful to be able to find your tribe. Yeah. And like people that are actually supportive and get it, like get what it is that you're all about and that you're trying to accomplish in life. And thanks be to God for anybody that is authentic enough with themselves to strive for that journey.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, that's what it's all about, man.
Kind of to go off to the quote, and this is a good closing quote.
Let's close on the wisdom, bro.
C.S. Lewis said, "The hardships often prepare ordinary people for extraordinary destinies," and I will definitely, I don't know, I resonate with that.
Yeah. When did that quote come into your life, and what fruit have you gleaned from that?
I heard that quote years ago. I didn't process it, and about just around the time I started my business is when I found that quote again. Unsuccessful in that business, but like you were saying, it brought that mountain of failures that it's not the failures that drove me, it's the failures that propelled me to the next step.
Yes.
And,
you're either winning or learning, and learning is winning. So you're winning.
Yes.
That's one of my favorite mantras.
And that's it. It's the hardships, man. Go. I don't know. Sometimes guys are a little self-destructive. Sometimes guys got to just put a little bit of hardship in their life to get them to the next step, and so you create that own drama. But like,
sheep, it wasn't a compliment,
right? They got a lot of diseases, and one of them is just dumb.
We're just dumb. Post fall. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, don't go create that hardship. But
right.
Sometimes you kind of do, and if you can overcome that, even better.
Yes, more power to you.
Yes.
Literally.
Yeah.
So true, man.
Awesome.
Man, thank you for the
absolutely. This has been a very fun conversation.
Yeah, 100%, bro.
Always, I love you, man. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, 100%. And I look forward to whatever God has in both of our lives.
Yeah.
And I'm praying for your ministries.
Thank you.
And 100%. And let me know how we can plug in and collaborate.
Absolutely.
And if you enjoy content like this, I exhort you to please hit that like, subscribe, share it, help us to get the word out that we are building bridges here in the Western New York community with community leaders that are making a difference. And God bless you.
God bless.
Boom.